So I'm going to have my last sip of cinnamon zero Coca-Cola, which isn't that good, actually. I remember it tasting a lot better than this when I tried the first bottle, but on we go. It is now 9:53, and so chronologically we move to 1979. We're of course jumping over the much talked about, much praised, much loved Halloween, and we're going to another TV movie, actually. And this, again, released in 1979, we get the King playing the King, Elvis. I'm a huge fan, or as Donald Trump would say, huge fan of Kurt Russell. And I'm a pretty big fan of John Carpenter. So those two together always produces dynamite as far as I'm concerned. You look at Escape from New York, you look at The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China. So we got this one. We also have Escape from LA, which I haven't seen. So two more Kurt Russell Carpenter collaborations. The Carpenter Kurt collaborations. And yeah, I don't have high hopes for it. I really don't. But I think that a young Kurt Russell definitely could pull off an Elvis. And this is a very young Kurt Russell. So I'm really looking forward to this one. The only thing is, it is 3 hours long. All of these films, bar this one, are like 80 to 90, 100 minutes at the most. I think there might be one that's 2 hours, actually. But regardless, in fact, maybe a couple of them are, but most of them are fairly short-ish. This one is 170 minutes. So two things I wanted to say about Someone's Watching Me. Again, I'm jumping back and forth all over here, but I do forget these things. When I was saying that the how like funny the performances were from the main cast in Someone's Watching Me, funny in a kind of natural, kind of genuine way. A lot of that goes to the writing as well. So I think that Carpenter's writing was really witty, like the back and forths, like particularly when the main character Lee meets the man in the bar and kind of decides she wants to kind of approach him and basically flirt with him. And throughout the whole film, everyone's like trying to get flirt with her, and she's like, nope. They make an effort to really show this woman going, no means no. And then she sees a guy in a bar and she's interested in him, so she goes over and talks to him. And just that whole exchange, and all of the exchanges were really kind of vibrant and kind of bubbly, which is down to the performances, but I do think the writing goes a long way to making those things work. And I think there was something else that I just forgotten as I was about to... See, I had something, there were two things, and then the other thing went, so it was kind of like jumping all over the place. Maybe it'll come back to me, I do not know. What was I was saying? It was a TV movie, we're doing Elvis... 100. That's it. It popped back in my head again. Okay, because I was thinking this is a TV movie, 170 minutes. I'm not sure whether this was shown over a couple of nights, whether it was like a marathon, like 4-hour event, because obviously you have adverts on television. And that's what jumped out to me about the second half of Someone's Watching Me, is there were very specific kind of cliffhangery like scene endings, where like the main character Lee is in her bedroom, the phone rings and she's like, oh my god, and puts the phone down, then the lights start dimming. So he's controlling the lights in her house, and she just has this like breakdown, and then it fades to black. And it very much felt like now to the ads, and just a couple of times in the second half of the film I really noticed the kind of ad break section. So I'm intrigued to see if this will have similar beats where it feels like kind of the end of a certain chapter, almost as if it was a book. So yeah. Oh wow, this actually says Bing Russell, Kurt Russell's real life dad, plays Vernon Presley, who I can only assume is Elvis's dad. That's really cool. Kurt Russell's dad gets to play his actual father in the film. So let's jump into it, let's check it out. This might be the last one for day 2. I would like to push on to a fourth film. We'll see where I am in approximately 3 hours, or knowing me, it might take 5 hours to watch this, because I stop, I check my phone every now and again. I really need to get away from that. That's the thing. That's something. I'm sorry, I need to go into this just a little bit. It's difficult for me. It really is to sometimes just sit down and watch a film. Not generally, but if I'm doing one and one, it's difficult. It really is. I need to remove myself from that mindset. I really do. I'm trying so hard. I feel like today's been a real failure as far as that's concerned. Even though I enjoyed doing nothing at the beginning of the day, I should have just gone on with it, and that has cost me, I think, being able to do this by the end of Monday. So I think we're going to definitely roll into Tuesday. Regardless, this doesn't mean anything. I don't know why I keep this shit in. It's me. I just do it, I guess. It's all part of the journey, all part of the marathon experience for me anyway. So Yeah, tomorrow I will try to be more on the ball, not really pay attention to the internet too much, and just get on with it. So that's what I'm going to do now. So let's get on with Elvis, which also happens to be my brother's name. So, Elvis, shout out to you. He can't watch this, he's like 3. So, alright, the movie. Ah, it seems like John Carpenter has a bit of a Hitchcock thing going on. Yeah, just 3 minutes into the film. Hello! There he is, a man himself. Smoking a cigarette, would you believe it? Alrighty, it is 2:22 a.m. and I'm done with John Carpenter's Elvis. He didn't write this one, and where do I even go with this one? It's difficult. It's really difficult, this, because I feel like I could do an hour-long review on this film. There's just so much to get into, and so many elements to discuss. I loved it. I know it doesn't have a very good reputation. I think most people can agree that Kurt Russell is pretty great in this as Elvis. But for the most part, I think that the film is viewed in a fairly negative to mediocre fashion. And maybe I can even understand that. Maybe I can see that this film, as much as it tries to be extensive and to cover as much ground as possible in the life of Elvis Presley, it ultimately does skirt over a few things and even drags at a few points in the film. And there are certain little mini scenes that just don't seem to feel necessary, I think. There's a couple of those in the film. There's one where his grandmother is playing Silent Night on the piano. You know, it's a fairly kind of, for like a one-shot kind of little mini scene. It just I don't know. I guess it announces that it's Christmas, but her character in the film isn't really there that much. And this is I don't know why I'm going into like really small, minor things that I thought wouldn't go in there first, but there was something else. There's a little scene where he's trying to start this toy plane. He's trying to spin the propeller around, and he stands up and he's like, he needs a light, and all of his friends jump in with a lighter. And it just shows you how like everyone is just there kind of waiting on him, hand and foot kind of thing. And then he tries to spin the propeller again. And it's just one of those things. The scene just went on for like a minute, and I was like, did we really need that? We could have just had the bit where they hold the lighters out for him, and it would have taken 10 seconds as part of another scene. So there are a few things I think that maybe could have trimmed it down just a little bit, but I do love that it took so much time. Essentially, and I went to this film completely blind as far as what kind of story this was telling, as far as Elvis is concerned. Obviously, there's so many things you could do, and I think that many biopics try to cover sometimes too much ground, or they don't cover enough. You know, there's so many ways to get it wrong. There's so many ways to get it right, and I can't really judge how right this film got. a lot of the things that portrayed. And I'm not a big Elvis fan in the sense of knowing a lot about his life, and so the reason it took me like 4 hours to watch this film is because I kept pausing it to look on Wikipedia to find out if that person was real, if that really happened. And I was quite surprised and pleased actually to find that even down to like lines of dialogue, they were trying to keep as true as possible. When Elvis goes to Sun Records and they're like, well, who do you sound like? And he's like, I don't sound like nobody. And it's just like, that was apparently a real thing that he said. So I love that they included that stuff. Now, from what I understand, there was a lot of drug use that went on in Elvis's life, and that is completely omitted from the film. And you got to understand, this was made in 1978, released in 1979, I believe. And so just after his death, a couple of years. So do you really want to be making a film about someone who just died and going into all of their dark, real life, tragedy in that sense? And in another sense, do you show him in his final days? And they don't, ultimately. So the film opens in 1969. He's about to start kind of doing a concert again after many, many years. He'd done the 68 comeback special. I'm at least familiar with that as a quasi, medium level Elvis fan. That's a fairly, a big point in his career, I think, the 68 special. But 69, he went to Vegas to start this concert tour to get back to doing that side of things, and by all accounts was trying to see if he could do it again and to kind of shut up some of the naysayers who thought that because he'd been away from the public eye for so long that he'd kind of lost it. So we open the film then in 69. He gets to the building and he's sitting down and he picks up his guitar and he reflects back when he was a kid, when he first got his guitar for Christmas. So we get a fairly extended look at him as a young boy, about 10 years old. And I thought, okay, now we're going to go back to present day. No, that flashback lasted 2.5 hours. I mean, this has got to be the record, or at least, it's up there as one of the longest flashbacks in film history. We get back to 1969, I think, like 2 hours and 35 minutes into the movie. So, it was kind of funny. It was almost getting more comical as the film went on to me, thinking, wow, we really still haven't gone back to 1969 yet. But I loved that they did actually try and tell a big chunk of his life, and I really enjoyed those childhood sequences. And then we see him as a young teenager in high school. That's where Kurt Russell steps into the role. We follow him through his rise to fame and becoming a megastar, going to the army, the passing of his mother, meeting Priscilla, eventually marrying her, having their child, Lisa Marie, and then we kind of meet up with 1969 and this concert tour. So that's what the film does. It kind of tells you most of his life and the broad strokes of his very successful career. And the thing that I really enjoyed about this is that it goes into a lot of the fame aspect. And again, I can't speak to how close to reality this was, but from now on, I'll react to this as if everything in this movie is completely true, just to kind of, save myself stopping and going, well, I don't know if it was completely true, Obviously, it's not going to be, to the letter. It's not going to be verbatim to real life, but I'll go on what the film presents me with, which by all accounts, again, looking into it, seems to be that they've tried to keep as true to things as possible. So he very much felt like the fame was a blessing and a curse, a blessing in the sense that he was able to reward his family after years of struggling, and being poor, and wanting to give his mother a house to live in, wanting to buy her a fancy car that she never would have had before. All these things he can do for his family and for his friends, very generous, very giving, but at the same time, a curse in that he can never be a normal person again. He laments the time when he could just go somewhere. He wants to go to Europe and travel the world and see places, but he can't. He'll be mobbed, and it would be worth $1 million to him if he could just, for a couple of weeks be a normal person. And, there's a scene where him and Priscilla are dancing at some get-together, and everyone just kind of like separates and just watches them. And he's like, doesn't that bother you when, everyone just drops everything when we come into the room? Priscilla wants to have one of her friends come over to Graceland, the house. And Elvis is like, I don't like outsiders, I can't be myself, So he becomes very closed off and paranoid to a degree. And then he gets to a stage in his life when he's kind of really searching for meaning and trying to deal with the losses in his life. And I'll tell you something that really connected me to this film. Number one is that my dad is a big Elvis fan, and I grew up hearing the music, and I was really almost moved at the very end because the movie ends with his first performance concert in Vegas, and the two songs were, I've already forgotten what the first one is, Blue Suede Shoes, and then the final song that he performs at the end of the film is The Wonder of You, which is my favorite Elvis song. At least it was when I was a kid. I love that song, and it reminds me so strongly of being a young kid and being with my dad, and I'm almost welling up thinking about it, because that's just kind of the shit you cherish, you know. It's a really nice feeling, and that song takes me right back to those days, almost as if I can see it now, you know, in front of me. And also, in another sense, because I had no idea that Elvis had a twin brother who was stillborn. And I was so touched throughout the film as he talks to his brother. Both when he was a kid, he would go to the grave and then to the stream nearby and talk into the stream and bring his brother like presents. You know, absolutely heartbreaking. And he feels a connection to his brother and speaks to him at times. There's a kind of great device in the second half of the film where he's sitting there kind of just, you know, thinking about his life and talking out loud to his brother Jesse and looking at his own shadow. And it gets to a point where right before he goes on stage at the end of the film, he's there and he's kind of like steeling himself. He's emotional. He's away from his daughter, but he has to do this. He has to go on stage. He's worried that he's going to get shot and killed like JFK and Martin Luther King, you know, these big famous figures, and he feels like that he's almost marked for death too. But he's really kind of, again, steeling himself to do this show, and then he turns and looks at his shadow. And I don't know if that was intentional and part of that whole Jesse kind of arc in the film, but to me that felt like he looked at his brother and said, okay, let's do this. And I don't know, there's something, it depends who you are, what you think about mortality, what you think about people's souls and everything. And I certainly err on the side of not so spiritual. But at the same time, I think that it's a very positive thing, and that there is something to energies. And for me personally, I had a brother who didn't make it. You know, 2 years before me, he was born, lived for a month, and died. And so I've always had that kind of, you know, is there something there? You know, and ultimately, I don't think there is. At the end of the day, I don't think there is. Not that I would take anything away from anyone who does think that, but I've had those moments growing up where I looked at my reflection once in the window and just thought, like, I don't know, can I speak to him? Can he speak to me? What would he have been like? You know, and throughout my life, I'm thinking like, hey, he would have been, you know, 15 now. You know, what would it have been like to have an older brother? And so I don't know, there's something about that really hit me, you know, hit me hard and hit home. And the scene when he gives his mother a car was very sweet and touching. But then he pulls out this little piece of jewelry that's real diamonds, and it's 2 hearts. And he said, "That's one." I'm gonna cry. He says, "That's one from me, one from Jesse." I don't think I've ever done this on video. Oh man. Wow, that's crazy. That is actually crazy. And the laughing is trying to mask me actually crying. That's really strange. Wow, okay. Whew. I can't get through it. Jesus Christ. Let me have a drink of water here. It's funny because I've talked about films that are so much more emotionally impactful than this. I guess it's just a personal thing, you know. Oh man, I'm gonna keep this in. I'm sorry. All right, that just really touched me, and his relationship with his mother, which is almost a bit too over the top. You know, it gets almost a bit kind of like, you know, his mother is his whole world, and I can certainly, you know, as someone who, you know, I love my mum and she raised me. You know, my dad was there, but he wasn't always there. And so, you know, I can relate to that too. Maybe not as much as Elvis in this film, but it was very sweet and touching. And I let a few tears roll, but I certainly didn't get as emotional as I just did then. Holy shit, I was really trying to hold it back there. I mean, the camera wasn't on. I probably would have had a little cry there, but okay, we're good. All right. So that's really strange. Now I know what happens if I'm in a kind of like a public situation where I feel really emotional and want to cry. I try to mask it with laughs. I didn't know that. Okay, so back to the film. That part of it really resonated with me and touched me, obviously, as you just saw. But also what I really liked was that I think that there's limitations in the film in the sense that they didn't have a huge budget. And a lot of that kind of Elvis mania is seen from the inside. It's insular because insular, does that work? I don't know. Where you're literally in Graceland with Elvis for like long stretches where you don't see the mania, you don't see the fans going crazy. You do at certain concerts and things like that, and they capture that brilliantly, actually, especially like with the girls going crazy with the hip gyrating and stuff. But the idea of him kind of being closed off. And again, I think the limitations of the budget that they probably had for this, where you do just focus on his perspective of everything, where to him, I'm just a guy, and it's hard for people sometimes to take an icon. And there's a short making of from the time that this film was released in the late 70s on the Blu-ray, which I watched, and John Carpenter was saying that, he becomes this kind of mythical figure, but we kind of just want to show him as just a guy at certain points, very loosely paraphrasing there. And I think that works really well. And I empathize with the character of Elvis in this film, because you see him come from nothing. You see his parents struggle. You see him get rich and famous and gets to kind of give his family and everyone and everything they could ever want. And then what? And his mother seems to struggle with that. Like, I just want him to be proud of me now. And she seems to struggle there. And so I really loved that focus of it. And almost, when the mother does pass away and it really hits him hard, it's almost like it's never the same. And I do feel like the second half of the film, I don't want to say suffers from that, because we're talking about people who really died, and everyone dies and everyone goes through loss. But it seems weird to say like, someone's mother actually dying wasn't good for the second half of the film. But I do feel like a piece of him died, and from then on he never is truly the same. He is and he isn't, And the whole Priscilla thing is interesting. I understand that they met when she was very, very young, and they do kind of touch on that. It's there. They don't dwell on it too much, but it is there. And their relationship seems quite tragic towards the end as well, and very sad as too. And Kurt Russell, incredible, I think. He's a great actor. He's one of my favorite actors, and I think he does a brilliant job of not impersonating Elvis. And again, something John Carpenter said in the making of was that, there's no point getting someone who just looks like Elvis. You need a good actor. And that's true. Kurt Russell doesn't look just like Elvis. Looks quite vastly different, in fact. But he has the same kind of build. He has the kind of hair that can kind of go along with it, and he certainly has the acting chops to pull off the swagger and the aura at times, and the showmanship as well. I think the voice is really good for the most part. There are certainly times, and I think I find this whenever an actor does an accent, when they start shouting, their real voice comes through. And there are moments when he gets heated in the film and is real. You can hear the real Kurt Russell coming through, but that's okay. That's all right. It's, for the most part, a really incredible job. And I really empathize with him as a guy. It really made me see him as a man, as a person, more than the legend. And I think that's a really good thing. And I'm a big fan of this film, despite the general consensus, I have to say. It could be better. I think it could have been trimmed down, or certain elements could have been expanded more. There's a lot of people who are part of his group, his band, that don't really get explained or explored. But again, you'd be looking at like an 8-hour movie if you were to really go into everything. It's a big life, and it's very bold to tackle as much of it as they did. But I think that the heart was in the right place when making this film, and I think it really comes off. Now, the singing is not done by Kurt Russell. They clearly had the foresight to say, okay, he can't sing like Elvis, so we're going to get someone to come in and do an Elvis singing voice, who I believe did the audio commentary on this, which isn't listed on the back of the Blu-ray, so I can't tell you exactly who it is. Oh, here we go. Elvis vocals by Ronnie McDowell. So he did the Elvis vocals, and it takes a while to get used to. The first time is when Elvis is outside his school playing his guitar and singing, and the lip syncing isn't perfect. It really isn't. And throughout the film, it remains that. At times, it really works. At times, it throws you off a little bit, but you just kind of get used to it, you know. And I think that Kurt Russell does pretty much the best job he could with that kind of. I'm not sure how they did it, if they had the vocals, playing on set while he was lip syncing to them. I don't know the process of that. I'd love to know that. I'd love to have like some proper, real behind the scenes on this, not just a fluff piece from when the film was made. There's not much on there at all. I would have loved. Oh my God, I would have loved for a Carpenter, Kurt Russell commentary special on this one, because their commentaries are so funny and enjoyable that it would be amazing to hear that on this, but one hasn't been done, nor has any kind of contemporary special features material been made about this film. I wish there would be. I hope that maybe, like Arrow Video or someone can kind of get their hands on this and re-release it and maybe do a new master of it, because it looked fine to me. I enjoyed it. It looked good, but it could look a lot better. And I'd love to see some new stuff from Carpenter and Kurt Russell reflecting on it. If only to look back on the beginning of one of the great director-actor collaborations, in my opinion. So, yeah, and there's a lot of other great actors. Shelley Winters does a great job as Elvis's mother. I mean, that is really the beating heart of the movie, is that relationship, I feel. And a lot of really good kind of side characters and performers. And yeah, I'm trying to think that I feel like there's so much more I could go into. Bing Russell, who plays Vernon Presley, does a good job. There's not much for him to do, I don't feel like, sometimes, but just be there occasionally. But it's nice that he's kind of Kurt Russell's father as well, so it's kind of a nice familial link there. And interestingly enough, Kurt Russell's first ever movie was an Elvis movie, or at least a movie that Elvis was in. And he played a part where he runs up and kicks Elvis in the shin. And apparently he also played an Elvis impersonator in a 2001 movie. I forget what the title is. And they kind of homaged that and had a young kid run up and kick Kurt Russell in the shin. That's really cool. But it's interesting that he was actually in a movie with Elvis. And the actress Shelley Winters, who plays Elvis's mother, I forget her name, Gladys, she knew Elvis when he was in his early 20s, so that's kind of fun. And yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, the music is great, even though you're not hearing Elvis sing. I mean, that's the one thing you'd think maybe like just use the Elvis tracks, but then you need to kind of work your own way into it, because there's lots of different things that they do. For instance, I believe the story is when Elvis was like very young, like 10 or 11 or something, or 9, he was in school and he sang Old Shep. In the movie, it's when he's like a teenager, So, I mean, obviously there's no recording of that, and so they need to have someone. So I think it's good that they just stayed consistent and had this Elvis vocal performer, Ronnie McDowell, kind of just do all of the Elvis singing. I think that makes sense, and to kind of dip in and out of the actual Elvis, real life recordings probably would have just mixed things up a little bit too much. And, should they have gone into more of the darker times? I think at the time, probably not. Maybe these days it would be interesting to explore. But, at the same time, I almost feel like I fell in love with Elvis a little bit with this movie, to the point where I don't want them to dwell on all that bad stuff, because it is what it is, and he had a very tragic and young death. And it's really sad. And do we really need to dwell on that? Sometimes it's nice just to have a made-for-TV movie kind of gloss over everything. As much as it's nice to get to the truth of everything, sometimes we can just, I don't know. Ignorance is bliss sometimes. I don't know. It really depends. It's really tricky when you're dealing with real-life people, I think. But, I think it was a nice way to end it with the kind of the legendary kind of, as you see in the front cover here, the Elvis, the white Vegas jumpsuit, and to end with the beginning of that portion of his career, not so much the end of it, which is, the whole Fat Elvis period, and of course his untimely death. But again, they made this so soon afterwards, it's still really raw, so it's, what do you do? I don't know. But I thought it was a very, very good film. I loved it more than it's a good film, I think, again, because of the personal connection I felt to it. And just because I think Kurt Russell did such a good job, and I really bought into his character. And, there are moments where he turns into a bit of an asshole, and I can kind of understand why, without them really even breaking it down too much. At one point, he's like, why am I like this? Why is this happening to me? And it doesn't really get answered. There isn't some kind of big resolution to that. And it even ends on a note where things aren't perfect with him and Priscilla and his daughter. And that's just the way it is sometimes. But yeah, I really was quite taken with this. And I'm really glad that I finally saw it. So I think I'll leave it there for Elvis. Again, I feel like I could ramble on so much more, but it's probably best to leave it there, I think. I mean, there's so much ground to cover, so many scenes that I could talk about, but I'd just be here forever, I think. But for the most part, I was, again, very taken with it. Maybe a little bit too long, but not even by that much. I think 2.5 hours would be kind of perfect for it, actually. Just that section when he comes back from the army and, is kind of mired in kind of isolation for a little bit, and kind of the difficulty with Priscilla and so on, that really slows down proceedings. And again, it did have, just like Someone's Watching Me, very obvious kind of ad break endings on scenes where it would fade out and then just start again. So almost a little bit jarring, but not too much. It really felt fine as a feature-length presentation. I read that they did actually, screen this in cinemas as well. So there we go, Elvis. Next up, which will not be tonight. I feel like I need to go to bed. and we'll start day 3 off, hopefully a lot earlier, and I can power through some more films. If this was like an hour and a half, I might have gone for it. It's now 2:46. I probably could have gone for an hour and a half, but the next film is almost 2 hours long, and it is from 1983. So we're now leaving the 70s, finally, and jumping into the amazing decade of the 80s, and I'm going to check out next, Christine. Yeah, I've heard really good things about this. In fact, I think my dad was talking about this recently, and my brother. I might have to ask my brother about that, actually, and maybe get back to you tomorrow in the next clip. But yeah, anyway, so Christine is about a killer car, apparently. Isn't this something to do with Stephen King? Am I completely imagining that? I really don't know. Yes, based upon the novel by Stephen King. So we've got Keith Gordon in this, and Harry Dean Stanton. Awesome. I love me a bit of Harry Dean Stanton. Rest in peace. So Christine will be the next film number 6. And I don't know how many hours I've done now, but it's quite a few. Not as much as I would have liked at this point in the marathon, but I'm really enjoying this, I have to say. And yeah, that was quite an experience pack. I'm still thinking about the fact that I was almost about to burst into tears, and I got really choked up in a video. Okay, so I'm good now. It's all fine here now. How are you? So it's good night from me, and rolling on with day 3, which I'm really looking forward to, because there's quite a few films now from the 80s and then 90s onwards, which I'm quite excited to check out. But yeah, thinking about it, I would probably put this at my number 1 now of the films so far. I think Someone's Watching Me might be a better film, actually, just because it's it's hour and a half, nothing feels wasted. So yeah, maybe that's my main gripe, just a little bit too long perhaps, and maybe some other elements could have been clarified just a teeny bit. Like the Colonel, that's one last thing. The guy who managed Elvis, I believe, the Colonel, he just seemed to appear, and I don't quite know, because there was someone that they went to audition for, and he wasn't interested, and Elvis got really mad. And I'm not sure if that was the same guy who then decided to take them up. Then his friends had a meeting with the guy in a diner, but I wasn't sure who the friends were either. The only kind of mainstay in his life, in the movie, as far as his friends in his life, is Red, who I had to look up was a real guy, and he was a real guy. But it isn't even made clear what he does. He's just one of the helpers, I guess. But there's a scene at the beginning of this film when Elvis is kind of styling his hair in the bathroom. Look at me. I was just about to wrap this video up and I'm going back into it. He's styling his hair, and the other kids are kind of like, we're going to beat him up because he's like a girl playing with his hair. And Red comes in and he's like, what are you doing there? Stop doing that. He's like, if you're going to cut his hair off, you're going to have to cut mine off. Now that's a whole other different situation. And they all leave. And to me, the actor who plays Red looks like he's about 30. So I thought he was a teacher. I didn't realize he was one of Elvis's high school friends. So he just kind of looks the same age from teenager all the way up to 20 odd years later. But yeah, Red, I like the actor who played him, and I liked they got into it a little bit with him, how he wasn't invited to the wedding and so on, how he was a little bit raw about that. but I would have liked a little bit more clarification about his relationship with Elvis. So yeah. And the hair, I didn't know that Elvis dyed his hair black, because at the beginning it's brown, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well maybe it was brown when he was a kid and it got darker, and then Kurt Russell's hair is just brown. I'm like, oh, well, I guess they didn't decide to, and then he's like, I want to dye it black, jet black. And then they kind of touch on the fact that it's to look like his mother, or as a tribute to his mother. And then he got his wife Priscilla to dye her hair black. I'll leave that one in for free. And so that's kind of an interesting, there's a bit where he's like looking, he's like, you look just like my mama. And I'm just like, little bit creepy, He really had an obsession with his mother. But, I tend to look at it in more of a sweet kind of loving way and a touching kind of way as well. So I'll leave it there for Elvis. Christine tomorrow. And yeah, we'll leave it there. I'm probably going to be thinking about my brother tonight as I go to bed, and like I always do every couple of years, and think about the what ifs and all that kind of stuff. And it's important. I think I'll end on this. I think it's important to remember people who have been not around for very long. I mean, obviously, and when anyone dies, you remember them, but when it's someone who never had a chance to even make an imprint, which I feel like that's what my brother was to an extent. I mean, he was there for like a month, and he wasn't supposed to be. My dad said to me once, it was, he was in my hand, I had him, he was there, he was alive, he wasn't supposed to be, but he was there, he was breathing. And that in itself is kind of special to my parents, I guess, but the fact that I never grew up kind of not knowing about him and was always talking about it when I was a kid, my brother up in heaven. So I think that's really important. Not something a lot of people go through, but when it does, I think it is important to remember and have that respect for that person, to the point where you are kind of keeping them alive in a little way by thinking about them and remembering them. And that's certainly, at least as far as the film is concerned, is something that Elvis always did and was probably instilled in him by his parents, and probably his mother especially. And to just remember and kind of honor his brother's memory in that sense. And then there's a funny moment on the Blu-ray. There's like this selection of vintage clips, and there's a guy reading out Elvis's life story, and he's like, yeah, he had a twin brother who didn't make it. And he's like, boy, what would that be like if there was another guy walking the face of the planet who looked just like Elvis Presley? Which I think everyone thinks that probably when they hear that he had a twin brother. It's like, wow, that would have been like a real case of double trouble, especially if he could sing like him too. Holy shit. But yeah, so I think that was the part of the whole story that really I liked the most, and I never knew. And so that's the film did its job. It taught me something about Elvis I didn't know, which turns out there was a lot of things about Elvis I didn't know, but something I think really important about him. And I really do hope that was true, that he really held his brother in high regard in that sense, and that it was special to him in that sense. And again, I'm just waffling now, but that's kind of something that I take to heart for sure with the film. And yeah, so there we go. I'll leave it there.